Hello, everyone. This video will cover some basic encoding instructions for tagging poetry. And to do this, we'll look at a fairly simple example of a poem in manuscript. This is a poem that was submitted to Marianne Rawson as part of the Bow in the Cloud anti-slavery anthology that we reviewed in a previous video. And what I've done here is I've put a transcription of this manuscript in Oxygen. And for now, I've just put the transcription within the body element of the TEI all file. And what we need to do to add some poetry elements is we need to start thinking to ourselves about what we mean by a poem. And that can sometimes help guide your thinking. But first of all, even if this weren't a poem, we would have something like a title, which we have obviously, and we're going to put that within a head element. And also, I'm going to put in a page break element with a facts attribute to link up to this facsimile here on the left. Okay, so we've got a page break element that indicates a facsimile link to the image. We've got a title for the poem, which I've also given line breaks so that it follows the conventions in the manuscript here. And then finally, we're into the poem structure. Now, this structure kind of announces itself in a very salutary way. It's a sonnet. And there are many kinds of sonnets, of course, but if you have a quick glance at the sonnet, you'll see that it's fairly standard sonnet that ends in a rhyming couplet. So it's more like a Shakespearean sonnet, but it does take some liberties with the rhyme scheme, as we'll see. But in terms of thinking in TEI, oftentimes the way that you'll think about encoding is, again, thinking about what we mean by a poem. So what do we mean by a poem in TEI terms? We mean a group of lines. So we can render that in TEI by highlighting the entire poem and choosing Command E or Control E if you're on a Windows machine, and typing in LG for line group. And that gives us our line group element. And we're not quite complete yet because every group of lines needs to contain some lines. So each line in the poem needs to have an L element. So you'll just want to go through and highlight each line, add an L tag, and might be the most tedious bit of it. And if I were encouraging a shortcut to this, some people write scripts to transform transcriptions into individual tags like this. But what I do is I transcribe a poem in Markdown and use a conversion software called Pandoc to convert my Markdown into TEI, which gives me this structure. But that's a topic for another day. And now we have a valid TEI poetry document. And now we need to add some additional features to make this a bit more descriptive. So first of all, I said this was a sonnet, right? So what you can do within an LG element is to add a type attribute. And we'll just add that it's a sonnet. What we can also do is add a rhyme attribute to indicate its rhyme scheme. And this poem follows an ABBA, ACCA, DEED, FF rhyme scheme. So we could enter that into this rhyme attribute, but I think it's a little bit easier to break this poem down into its constituent parts a bit further. So every sonnet, or this particular sonnet, consists of 3 quatrains and a rhyming couplet. So what we can do is add nested LG elements And then within the type attribute, further explain that it's a quatrain. And within the quatrain, we can add the rhyme scheme. And that's a little bit easier to manage. And we'll do the same for this next quatrain. And finally, our rhyming couplet at the end. Generally with TEI, if you have the time, it's always best to mark up as much descriptive information as you can. So in theory, you would have been fine marking up this poem within a single LG element. But by breaking it up, you're giving further instructions about what this poem is consisting of. So what else can you do? You can go within the poem and add additional features that are specific to poetry. So for example, we've got these rhyme schemes as attributes within each LG. What you can also do is add rhyme words. You can tag rhyme words, that is. So here, we'll surround this rhyme word with a rhyme element. And then we'll add a label. And the label will give our, will show A. And then we can do the same for the second rhyme word and label it B. Notice how I'm just tagging the word and not the punctuation. That is important. So now we have added some more rhyme information within this first stanza. What else could we add? You can add features like caesura, which marks the metrical pause in a line. So in this case, we've got some punctuation in this first line to give us a caesura. So we can add that here. And that is an empty element, meaning it doesn't contain any text. It's just a marker for a textual feature that doesn't contain any text by definition. And what else can we do? We can go within our L elements, our line elements, and add things like line numbers. So with an N attribute, we can add line number 1, for example, for line number 1. Another thing we can do that might be useful is to add a meter element. So we've got rhyme scheme, but you might want to have some record of the meter. And this poem is pretty much written in iambic pentameter. And if you read the first line, the mother sat and wept, her child was gone. That's a pretty simple demonstration of an unstressed, stressed iamb in 5 beats, in 5 feet. So we can just indicate that with minus signs for unstressed, plus signs for stressed. So the mother sat and wept, her child was gone. So now we've added to this L an N equals 1, a meter of showing the iambs. But we can also do some interesting things like enjambment. So if you don't know what enjambment is, it's when the grammar of a line follows over the line break into the next line. So the first example of enjambment is in the second quatrain here. For that most cruel loss, that one alone was all she had to love. So the enjambment is where that one alone goes into the next line, was all she had to love. So what we can do is, within this L element, we can add an enjam attribute. And I will just put a Y here for now as a designation, saying that this line indeed has enjambment. And indeed, the next line also has enjambment. So I'll just add that as well. So what we've done here is we've added a variety of elements that provide some basic structure to the poem, but also some information about the rhyme scheme, about the meter, about the line numbers, about the rhyme words. And that should help for processing purposes to help you determine and index what kinds of poem types there are, what kinds of meters are at play, and so on. And one last thing, the poem, as you can see here, is signed by J.E.R. And you heard me use the word signed. That's by the author. And we're kind of borrowing this from the correspondence set of elements in the TEI for letters, but it's applicable here as well, the signed element, which indicates the name. But what we could also do, which was similar to the epigraphic example, is we can surround this abbreviation with an abbreviation tag, and we can expand it in an expand tag as well to give readers the full name of the writer. And there we are. And I'll just show you in this next window here. This is the whole poem with most of these features encoded with all the rhyme labels and the types and all of the elements that I just went through. There's always more that you could add, but as always, it depends on the project's needs and how much time you have to encode all of these features. So that's all I wanted to show you for this one. Gabby, did you have any questions?
No, I think the only thing I would say is what we discussed earlier. Could you put the oh, I think we've lost Christopher. Never mind then.